We're recording.
Brilliant. Okay, so guys, Pom Pom and I, typically speaking, we're watching our macros pretty carefully these days, trying to make sure of that. And one of the ways we've kind of done it more than anything else is we usually do meal prep. So like, Sunday night or Monday night, or something like that, we'll do a big slow cooker or an instant pot of something, portion it all up into the exact portions and eat through the week. But of course, that can get boring sometimes and life happens and that sort of thing. And we need a quick macro-friendly meal, shall we say. And this is kind of like one of those things that like I can usually put together in usually about 20 minutes, give or take. And it's quick, it's tasty, and it's perfect for a weeknight when we're trying to run around and doing a whole shitload of stuff. So anyway, like I said, what we're looking at doing here is we've got ground meat of your choice. I've gone today with ground chicken breast. Typically speaking, when I've made this in the past, I find it actually best with ground beef. That's been at least the tastiest, but during the apocalypse, beggars can be choosers, and I couldn't find ground meat when I went to the store yesterday. So in any case, standard issue ground meat into the frying pan and browning. And when I say browning, I've said this to some people before. Turn that on. I mean, brown the meat, don't gray the meat. So many people that I've seen kind of do this, they just kind of like get it to a cooked period, like where it's cooked, but it's not actually crispy. You want crispy bits. And personally, like this is an optional extra for you guys. Depending on how closely you're watching your macros, I have the fat macros for this. So typically speaking, if I'm doing ground beef or ground pork or something like that. Hey, DK. How are you?
Hey, sorry, I was hanging out in the other empty meeting.
Yeah, so are we all. It's all good. We just got started, basically.
Okay, I don't even know if I have the right things, but I'm
all good. We're just browning ground meat, or if you're trying to be vegetarian, ground Beyond Beef or whatever you happen to have grabbed that day. I was just saying. Sorry.
I have salmon or I have tofu.
You could probably do this with tofu, I would say.
Rather than okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I was just saying here is if I'm doing this with ground beef or with ground pork, usually there's enough fat in the meat that I don't need to do this, but with ground chicken, there really isn't enough fat to brown it properly, in my opinion. So I put in about a tablespoon of olive oil just to kind of make things nice. Like I said, if you're watching the macros, and you don't have the fat macros for that one, you can leave it out. But typically speaking, I've got those. So just, as usual, break that up. And now would be a good time, as that is browning, if I, being the incredibly lazy sort that I am, just bought coleslaw mix. So if you did not buy coleslaw mix and you have a whole cabbage, as I believe Shine does, now would be an excellent time to be chopping up your cabbage. So essentially, with coleslaw mix, it's usually just cabbage with a little bit of carrot in it. Honestly, the carrot doesn't really bring anything to the table, in my opinion. So, just straight cabbage is probably good enough, in my opinion, if you're going to go that way. But in any case, just the usual browning of the meat. And what I like to do, typically speaking, again, this gets back to the browning of the meat and actually getting a little bit of color and some flavor in the meat, what I'll do is I will brown the meat separately. So essentially what we will do is we will cook this, wait till it gets a good and brown. Then we will take it out and we will do the vegetation quickly separately, because what ends up happening is the vegetation tends to release a lot of water. Thank you for copying that into the chat, DK. Appreciate that.
We're just cooking the meat with nothing else right now.
Sorry?
We're just cooking the meat with nothing else right now. Is that right?
Basically, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
You know, typically speaking, what I'll do at this point is I will give it a little pinch of salt, but very little, because you're going to be adding soy sauce later, and controlling the sodium content of this is a little bit difficult. But like, it is nice to actually get this meat a little bit of salt, because it actually will cook a little bit nicer that way in terms of that side of it. All right. Turn that up a little bit. So,
Mario, what temperature do you have yours on?
it's about medium. So like, you know, between, right now I have it between 4 and 5. So every stove top is different. And just breaking that meat up. And while you, like I said, while you're doing that, I did buy the coleslaw mix, but what I did do is I did not buy pre-sliced green onions, so I'm going to chop up my green onions at this point. Just grab a little bowl for that. So just, you know, make them small. All right.
You're getting me off the couch and making dinner, so this is good.
Excellent. That's never a bad thing. That is great. And in terms of the quantity of green onions, you know, you're looking at roughly 3 or 4 green onions. This is, again, more for flavor than anything else. The real bulk of this meal is kind of coming from the cabbage itself.
And are you using the whole green onion, or just kind of more the whiter parts, or just the whole thing?
I'm using the whole thing. I usually use the whole thing.
Is this going into a bowl, or are you putting this in with the meat right away?
Nope, we're leaving it aside for the time being. So right now I'm browning the meat separately, because like I said, I don't want the water that gets released from the vegetables to actually interfere with the browning, and it will. And like I said, that becomes the difference between browning your meat and graying your meat. And I mean, if you're doing tofu, DK, realistically speaking, you know what, just kind of crumble it up.
That's right.
And, you know, just essentially what you're going to do with that one, just crumble it up and actually try and get the water out of it. So just get it dry.
Okay.
I think this is going to take another couple of minutes. Keep that nicely going.
I'm doubling this recipe, and I've got a fair amount of fat in with my meat right now that I want to drain. Would I drain that now or wait until it's fully cooked?
I typically speaking will, what I'll try and do is I will wait until it's brown, then drain it. Because again, you know, that's what's going to make those nice brown crispy bits.
Yeah.
Is that extra fat.
Okay.
But I mean, like, you know, don't deep fry it either. I mean, it really depends on the type of meat that you're using. All right, I'm not sure where you guys are getting to with your meat, but mine is starting to get a little bit golden brown, so that's good. Probably looking at another couple of minutes there before we move on to the next phase.
Mine's still more gray than brown.
Keep it going, then. If you think you need to add a little bit more oil curry, go ahead.
Sure.
But, you know, once again, that typically speaking tends to be relatively macro dependent. So.
I actually have green onions. What?
Excellent. Yeah, it's actually quite rare that I have green onions as well. I usually have to buy that specifically for this recipe. So.
I like to put them in eggs, but I wasn't able to find any eggs at the store last time I went.
Nice. Yeah, it's a bit odd right now, to be honest with you, what you can find and what you can't. Although I must admit, when I went to the store yesterday, they had most of everything back in stock. I mean, there was even toilet paper on the shelf. Go figure.
Yeah. And finding the quality of stuff is quite inconsistent too. Like asparagus is so nice this time of year, and I haven't been able to find any nice asparagus.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I was having a hard time with the other day. Finding good lettuce actually was really tough for some reason. I don't know. All right, guys. So mine is starting to get roughly golden brown, so that's relatively what I'm kind of going for, just, you know, in terms of crispiness. You know, it could possibly get a little bit more crispy, but that's getting pretty close. So one more toss here. That. I think I'm good. So I am okay. I am going to take this out into a separate dish for the time being. Where are you guys at with your meats or protein substitutes?
My meat looks correct, so I'm gonna take it out too.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
I think I'm brown.
Brilliant. Okay, so what I would do then is, at this point, turn it down a little bit. I like to turn it down to relatively, like, you know, maybe down to 3.5, just because a little bit. I add another tablespoon-ish of olive oil. I let that get hot. And I am going into my green onions and garlic. And as much as I like garlic, I do not like the outside, so I don't want that to fall in. So again, make this as garlicky as you like. If you like a lot of garlic, there's nothing wrong with 3 or 4 cloves. If you're not big into garlic, 1 or 2. So I am going to go with 2 nice big cloves. Peel the garlic. If you've got a garlic crusher, I recommend using that. If you don't, just chop it up fine and throw it into your pan.
Did you say onion and garlic, or just the garlic for now?
Right now, I like to put the garlic in for about 30 seconds, and then I'll put in the onion. Toss it around, just let it get a little bit of color, and then add the cabbage. All right, let's turn it down.
Do you ever grate your garlic?
Yeah, when my, whatchamacallit, when my garlic press is dirty, I have indeed. All right. The one thing you don't want to do, excuse me, you don't want to burn your garlic. It's going to give off some nasty flavors that way. So, like I said, maybe about 30 seconds, just until it gets a nice little bit of brown on it. Add your onions. Let them get in there a little bit. Just move it around a little bit. Just want to get that flavor going. And then your cabbage. Oops. Now, it really depends on how hungry you are as to how much cabbage you want to use here. I usually try and cover the pan with all of the cabbage. Now, this will reduce, obviously, as it cooks. So one thing that, 1 second here, guys. Yeah. I just spilled some cabbage on the floor. I wanted to get it before the dog did. I'm not sure she's going to be happy with eating cabbage. All right. So what you want to do now is just toss this down, and you want to just cook the cabbage through so that the cabbage is cooked but not mushy. So you're not making cabbage soup here. You're just actually trying to cook this enough that it still has some bite to it, That's a big piece of cabbage. I don't want that. That's just not going to cook. That's the one thing when you're cooking this yourself. Now this will cook for about, I would say, 5 minutes total. But again, your mileage may vary. It might be a little bit less than that. It might be a little bit more than that. Cabbage I don't like the look of. All right. And the way I kind of eyeball it, to be honest with you guys, is that like this, typically speaking, you want to get to about, maybe about half of the volume that it was previously. So like if you take a look at this now, you know, you'll see that that cabbage is starting to reduce as, you know, the water comes out of it. Not making it mush, but it's definitely not covering as much of the pan as it had previously. Just keep it moving. Try and get a little bit of color on it, but you know, it's tough with vegetables sometimes.
I had a purple cabbage. It looks really pretty.
Perfect. Even better. All right. So if it does not start to smell really good right now, I think you've done something wrong, because honestly, this smells fantastic. That's mostly the garlic. So give out a little bit of a taste. I would say at this point, now that it's soft, it's reduced, it's a good time to reintroduce your protein. Throw that right back in. The heat to low, and this is the flavoring stage. So what I've got here is I've got just plain white vinegar, soy sauce, and for heat, I've gone with red pepper flakes. You can use sriracha if you like that instead. It's all dependent on your own personal taste. So I put in about a tablespoon, give or take, of white vinegar. And then about approximately 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, straight in there. Turn the heat back up a little bit and just toss it in there. This will continue to cook. So the idea here is to add this stuff.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, I have rice vinegar, balsamic vinegar, and I have lemon juice.
Rice vinegar.
Okay.
In fact, some recipes for this actually recommend rice vinegar as opposed to white vinegar.
Okay.
I like the tang of just plain old cheap white vinegar, but if you're going to pick, you know, something nicer, rice vinegar is definitely the right choice.
Okay. How about if you have to choose between rice vinegar and champagne vinegar?
I would still go rice vinegar. This is an Asian flavored meal, so I would go rice vinegar over just as the second choice over just about anything. All right, guys. So you want to just cook this enough that most of the liquid is absorbed, and now spice to taste. So in terms of red pepper flakes, you know, just a relative sprinkling. It depends on how spicy or how non-spicy you want it. Okay.
Awesome.
Now, let's see here. This is basically done now. So I am going to give it a taste. Not bad. Not bad. I think it needs just, mine needs a quick pinch of salt. Sometimes, again, like I said, the soy sauce will add a lot of saltiness to it. But, you know, it all depends on the type of cabbage you have and the type of meat you have. So I thought that that needed just a little bit more salt. Maybe just a touch more vinegar to give it a little bit more brightness. Again, this is really dependent on your taste and how your flavoring has come through. So, as you can see, this is basically how it looks. We pretty much ended up, you know.
Cool.
And like I said, I mean, this has probably taken us 25 minutes-ish, give or take, I think, maybe even less. Give this one more little try here. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I like it a little bit on the tangy side, so I'll usually add a little bit more vinegar than some people, but again, it's personal taste. And as you can see, really two little bowls. There we go, guys.
Yum.
Dinner.
Awesome.
Thank you, Super Mario. I'm going to
Thank
turn
you.
off recording now, and then we can all be candid.